I had heard whispers of strange things in Afghanistan, but I never believed them. Not until we saw it with our own eyes. It was 2002. My unit was stationed near Kandahar. The terrain was brutal. Jagged mountains, endless caves, and an eerie silence that stretched for miles. We were tasked with clearing a network of caves believed to be hiding Taliban fighters. Intelligence suggested the enemy was using the system to move undetected. But what we found was something else entirely. Our team of 8 was on foot, moving cautiously along the mountain's base. The entrance to the cave system loomed ahead, a dark hole carved into the rock. It looked unnatural, too perfectly shaped, too deep. Something about it made my skin crawl. Inside, the air was stale and suffocating. The deeper we moved, the stronger the stench became, like rotting meat mixed with decay. Then we saw the bones, piles of them, stripped clean. Some were animal, but others were human. Jesus, muttered Corporal Hayes. What the hell is this? A low growl rumbled from the darkness ahead. Every hair on my body stood on end. We raised our weapons. Then we saw it. A massive figure, at least 12 feet tall, emerged from the shadows. Its skin was a deep leathery red, stretched over an impossibly muscular frame. Long matted hair hung down its back, and its eyes, burning orange, locked onto us with a primal, murderous hunger. It clutched a massive spear, the tip caked in old blood. "Open fire!" someone screamed. Bullets tore through the cave, deafening in the enclosed space. But the thing barely flinched. It let out a roar that shook the very walls, charging with terrifying speed. It impaled Sergeant Daniels before we could react, lifting him like a rag doll and slamming him against the wall. His screams were drowned out by the sound of cracking bones. We scrambled back, unloading everything we had. Finally, a well-placed grenade sent the creature crashing down. We didn't wait to see if it was dead. We grabbed Daniel's broken body and ran. Outside, we radioed command. A retrieval team was sent, but when they arrived, the cave was empty. No blood, no body, no bones, as if nothing had ever been there. They told us to forget what we saw, to chalk it up to stress and exhaustion. But we knew the truth. The locals had spoken of giants for centuries. Legends passed down about ancient beings that stalked the mountains. We had laughed it off. We weren't laughing anymore. When we made it back to base, word got around about what we had seen. Some of the Afghan villagers approached us cautiously, their faces grim. An elder pulled me aside one evening and, in hushed tones, told me stories I wish I had never heard. He spoke of the devourers of men, creatures that had roamed these mountains long before any civilization dared to settle there. He said they were the remnants of something older than time, beings that had lived in the deep places of the earth, surfacing only when the land was disturbed. Another villager, a younger man, whispered about a group of shepherds who had vanished years ago near the same caves. Their goats had been found, torn apart and scattered across the rocky slopes, but not a single trace of the men was ever discovered. I tried to convince myself it was just folklore, that we had encountered some undiscovered species, something explainable. But deep down, I knew better. It was 2011, and my unit had been stationed in a remote valley in Afghanistan for nearly 3 months. We were used to the tension, the sudden firefights, the endless dust that clung to everything. But nothing could have prepared us for what happened at Outpost Sentinel. Sentinel was an abandoned Afghan village turned military outpost, nestled between steep mountains that blocked any radio signals. We were sent to reinforce it after reports of Taliban activity in the area. But when we arrived, something felt off. The previous unit that had occupied Sentinel had left in a hurry. There were still half-eaten MREs, boots, and personal items scattered around, but no one ever explained why they left so suddenly. The first night was uneventful, but something about the silence didn't sit right. The usual nighttime sounds, distant gunfire, howling winds, were absent. It was like the valley itself was holding its breath. On the second night, I was on watch duty with Corporal Diaz. Around 1:30, he nudged me and pointed to the ridgeline. "You see that?" he whispered. I followed his gaze and felt my stomach twist. A figure stood on the ridge, completely still. Too tall to be an Afghan villager, too motionless to be a normal patrol scout. I reached for my rifle, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. The next day, our squad leader, Staff Sergeant Holden, dismissed it as exhaustion. But Diaz and I knew what we saw, and we weren't the only ones. That evening, Private Lasky swore he heard whispers outside the perimeter, speaking in a language none of us recognized. We chalked it up to paranoia, until our comms equipment started picking up static. And then, faintly, words. Not in Pashto, not in Dari. It was in English. "Help me." Holden ordered a full sweep of the perimeter, but we found nothing. No footprints, no signs of movement, but the unease settled over us like a thick fog. Then, on the fourth night, everything went to hell. I woke up to screaming. Lasky was gone from his bunk. His gear was still there, but he was just gone. We searched every inch of the outpost, but the only trace we found was his rifle leaning against the main entrance. The dust around it was undisturbed, as if he had vanished into thin air. That night, we set up a watch rotation. I took first shift with Diaz again. Around 12:45, we heard it. Boots crunching in the gravel just outside the walls. Not just one pair. Dozens. We knew there were no friendlies in the area. We prepared for an attack. But when Holden gave the order to shine our lights, the beams cut through the darkness and revealed nothing. No men. No tracks. Just the wind. At sunrise, we called in an urgent request to leave Sentinel. HQ finally approved our withdrawal, but the exfil wouldn't arrive until the next morning. That last night, none of us slept. We sat in a tight circle, weapons ready, waiting. Then just past midnight, the whispers started again. Only this time, they were inside the outpost. Holden was the first to react, spinning toward the sound. He fired a single shot into the darkness before freezing. His face went pale, eyes wide in terror. "There's someone behind us," he whispered. I turned, expecting an enemy combatant. But there was nothing. Just the empty doorway leading into the barracks. Then came the footsteps. They started slow, deliberate, moving toward us. We backed up against the wall, rifles raised, but we couldn't see anything. The air grew colder, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I couldn't explain. Pure, unfiltered dread. The footsteps stopped just a few feet away. And then, in a voice that sent ice through my veins, we heard Lasky's voice. "Help me!" At dawn, the chopper arrived. We didn't speak as we boarded. No one looked back. As we lifted off, I stole one last glance at the outpost below. And there, standing on the ridgeline where I first saw the figure, was a line of motionless silhouettes. Watching. We never got answers. Lasky was declared MIA. Sentinel was abandoned, deemed strategically unimportant. But sometimes, late at night when the wind is just right, I swear I can still hear his voice, calling for help.
War changes the way you see the world. But some things, some horrors, have nothing to do with war at all. It was 2009, and my unit had been stationed at a remote outpost deep in the mountains of Afghanistan. The terrain was brutal, the nights colder than I had expected, and the silence of the wilderness felt unnatural. We were there to monitor enemy movement, but after a few weeks we started hearing other things. It began with the distant wailing. At first we thought it was the wind. The way it howled through the valleys at night was eerie enough. But after a while we realized it wasn't the wind at all. The sound was different, higher pitched, almost human but distorted, like someone crying out from miles away. One night, Corporal Mitchell swore he saw something moving along the ridgeline. "Someone's out there," he whispered, eyes locked on a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. The figure stood unnaturally still, just watching. No weapon, no movement, just standing there. We called it in, assuming it was a scout for the Taliban. A team was sent to investigate, but by the time they got there, the figure was gone. No footprints, no tracks in the dirt. Nothing. A few nights later, we heard the wailing again. Closer this time. And then, the knocking started. It was always the same. 3 slow, deliberate knocks against the outpost's outer walls. It made no sense. We were stationed in an open area with no cover nearby. No one could have snuck up without us seeing them. One night, Private Davis had enough. "Screw this," he muttered, grabbing his rifle. He stepped outside the bunker, shining his flashlight across the darkness. Nothing. He was about to turn back when the light flickered. Just for a second. But when it came back, someone was standing just at the edge of the light. Not moving. Not speaking, just standing there. Davis bolted back inside, slamming the door shut. "We're not alone," he gasped, his face drained of all color. After that night, everything escalated. The figure on the ridgeline appeared more often, always closer than before. Some of the guys started refusing to do night patrol alone. One morning, we woke up to find deep scratches on the walls of our outpost. Long, jagged claw marks that hadn't been there the night before. Then, Sergeant Collins went missing. It happened during his night watch. We heard nothing. No struggle, no gunfire, just silence. When we searched for him at dawn, we found his rifle lying in the dirt about 50 feet from the outpost. There were footprints leading away from the site, but they weren't his. They were larger, deeper, like someone or something had dragged him into the hills. We never found him. Command chalked it up to enemy action, but none of us believed that. The Taliban would have left a body, or at least made a statement. Instead, all we had was silence. On our final night at the outpost, just before we were ordered to relocate, we heard the knocking again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. But this time, they came from inside the bunker. We left at sunrise. To this day, I don't know what we encountered in those mountains. I try to tell myself it was just the stress, the exhaustion, the isolation getting to us. But sometimes when I see a dust storm rolling in or catch the scent of burning sand, a chill runs down my spine. Because deep down, I know. Some things were never meant to be disturbed, and some things never truly disappear.